Coming up on New Day at Arirang, with the current set of toughened antivirus restrictions set to expire on Sunday, South Korea will announce an extension in the coming hours. Officials forecasting an additional 5,000 new infections today. Eastern Europe now accounts for more than half of all COVID-19 deaths on the continent. Europe is the global hotspot for the highly transmissible Omicron strain. The US also posting record daily cases. Plus, Presidents Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin speak by phone about the Russian military buildup near Ukraine. The call coming as Moscow presses for security guarantees and test fires hypersonic missiles to show it means business.
Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of New Day at Arirang. It's 8 a.m. on December 31st, New Year's Eve here in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Mo-kyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Over the course of the next hour, we will be taking a look at the big news stories of the day and get some expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world. So, as per usual, we are going to start with the coronavirus situation in South Korea and around the world. We are entering year 3 of the pandemic, and arguably you could say we are in just a bad of a position, or even worse than we were a couple of years ago, unfortunately. Daily cases remain high here in South Korea, and the Omicron strain is driving an explosion of cases in Europe and North America.
And governments around the world are rolling out new measures to try and contain any further spread as we prepare to head into 2022. For more on this and other updates, our reporter Shin Yeun is here in the studio with us. Good morning, Yeun.
Good morning.
Now, like always, let's start with the local situation. How many cases are we expecting for today?
So we're expecting the daily tally to stay above the 5,000 mark yet again. Up until 9 p.m. Thursday, we recorded 4,349 infections, and that was down by 184 from what had been reported the same time the day before. Compared to a week ago, this figure came down by 1,349, which suggests that the toughened quarantine restrictions have had some effect.
So we are seeing this apparent downward trend in new cases here in South Korea. That being said, the authorities here are widely expected to extend this, these restrictions that are in place potentially for another fortnight.
Right, they are. They're pretty much set on extending the current virus prevention measures for another 2 weeks. And from December 18th, the country pressed pause on its gradual return to normal scheme. Instead, distancing restrictions have been toughened. Social gatherings were limited to 4 people, and a range of business operations were ordered to close at 9 p.m. Originally, these restrictions were set to be lifted this Sunday on January 2nd. But over the past few days, authorities have added momentum to the idea that current measures should be extended for another 2 weeks, meaning they'll last until January 16th. And this is mainly because of the Omicron variant that has been causing an uptick in new infections, not only on the local front, but globally.
So, Ian, aside from the extension of the current measures, are there any other changes that we're expecting?
Right, so authorities may release additional measures to help small and private business owners. Business owners have repeatedly expressed how social gathering caps and business hour restrictions have put their livelihoods at risk. Up until now, the government responded by handing out relief funds worth around $840 to each business. And we still need to wait and find out what exactly authorities are considering to do to further help these small business owners. Another change is in regards to extending vaccine passes to teens aged 12 and up. 30% of teens aged 12 to 17 still haven't received their first COVID-19 shot, and authorities are considering to delay the date when they'll start requiring teens to show either a proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test result to access public facilities from February to March. And the vaccine pass policy for teens was originally supposed to be imposed from February 1st. Also from the new year, those born in the year 2010 can reserve their first vaccine shots from January 4th because they'll be turning 12.
Right, I presume when you say they can reserve, you mean their parents
Yes,
can
definitely.
reserve for them. Don't want a bunch of 12-year-olds calling up for COVID vaccinations.
Right.
But South Korea isn't the only country tweaking its virus prevention measures. Omicron and to a lesser degree Delta is causing chaos around the world. How are other countries playing around with their virus prevention policies?
Right. If I take Italy, for example, they thought of a reasonable way to maintain economic activity even amid its chaotic COVID-19 situation. Authorities on Wednesday said they would exempt those who have been fully vaccinated or who have received a booster shot or recovered from COVID-19 within the last 120 days from having to go through self-quarantine, even if they come to contact with a person infected with COVID-19. The self-isolation period has been reduced from 7 days to 5, even for those who have recovered or have been vaccinated for more than 4 months. And Italy will also extend its vaccine pass, which is also known as a super green pass there, to all forms of public transport from January 10th. Now, other European countries like France, Portugal, Germany, and Northern Ireland have decided to close their nightclubs, meaning there will be no New Year's parties at clubs this year. The U.S. is also set on adding fuel to its booster shot campaign. As local news outlets reported, the FDA is expected to broaden eligibility for Pfizer boosters to youths aged 12 to 15 in the coming days.
All right, Yeun, as always, thank you for your reports throughout the whole year. We hope to talk to you again next year. Have a happy new year.
All right, thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. Wonderful reporting as always. Hope it continues in 2022. I'm sure it will. Staying with the pandemic, COVID-19 related deaths in Eastern Europe have topped 1 million now.
The grim milestone comes as many countries in Western Europe are reporting surges at record levels due to the rampant spread of the Omicron variant. Kim Hyo-sun has more.
The COVID-19 death toll in Eastern Europe surpassed 1 million on Thursday as the region continues to grapple with a massive surge in infections. According to Reuters, 3 out of 5 countries reporting the highest number of daily deaths in Europe are from the East, including Russia, Poland, and Ukraine. It adds Eastern Europe, which accounts for almost 40% of Europe's population, has witnessed over half the continent's total COVID-19 related deaths. However, the report pointed out that relatively fewer cases of Omicron have been detected in Eastern Europe compared to Western Europe, which has a bigger issue with a highly contagious strain. Never before seen surges are being witnessed in France, Italy, and Britain. France reported over 208,000 new cases on Thursday, a new national and European record. The country has been breaking infection records repeatedly over the past several days. Italy also reported a new high of over 126,000 new cases on Thursday, with hospital admissions also on the rise. The country's health authorities say this is due to the spread of Omicron, as well as a reluctance among some to get vaccinated. Officials say almost 3/4 of hospitalized COVID-19 patients in Italy are unvaccinated. People in the UK are struggling to obtain home testing kits or book appointments at COVID-19 testing centers after the country recorded its highest ever daily caseload. Despite the rapid spread, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says no additional restrictions will be implemented this year to limit the spread of Omicron, which already accounts for 90% of all community infections. In Russia, 103 Omicron cases have been detected as the country braces for another possible wave early next year. Russian health authorities say the new strain is 3 to 5 times more transmissible than previous variants, adding the risk of Omicron spreading will certainly increase in the new year. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. President Joe Biden spoke with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for the second time this month in a bid to de-escalate tensions over Ukraine. The White House said the phone call, which was requested by Putin, lasted for 50 minutes. No details have been revealed. However, Biden reportedly called for the immediate removal of Russian troops from Ukraine's border, expressing concerns about an invasion. Putin is assumed to have repeated calls for security guarantees, including a commitment that Ukraine would not be allowed to join NATO. It remains unclear whether an agreement was reached, but discussions will likely continue with Washington and Moscow slated to hold working-level talks in Geneva next month. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent a New Year's message to President Moon Jae-in, calling for further efforts to improve bilateral ties and to promote peace on the Korean peninsula. The Kremlin said Thursday that Putin also voiced hope the two countries will keep working together in various areas and continue pressing for regional peace. President Putin also mentioned the success of reciprocal exchanges and interstate projects jointly held this year to mark the 30th anniversary of their diplomatic relations. Meanwhile, North Korea is reviewing a draft of the final document to be adopted at the 4th plenary meeting of the ruling Workers' Party's 8th Central Committee. The state-run daily Rodong Sinmun, however, did not mention the contents of the document. It said Thursday, the 4th day of the meeting, that the gathering will continue. It explained the members held sectional workshops and consultative sessions to discuss various issues, including South Korea, the U.S., and defense. The outcome will set the direction for the regime's economic and foreign policies for next year.
The South Korean court has ordered the sale of a Japanese steel company's local assets to compensate Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. In the second ruling of its kind, the Daegu District Court's Pohang branch ordered Nippon Steel on Thursday to sell its securities of PNR, a joint venture company it has with South Korean steel giant POSCO. The verdict follows a Daejeon District Court September ruling that ordered Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to sell its assets in South Korea to compensate the victims. A matter of days after she received a presidential pardon, former South Korean President Park Geun-hye became a free woman at midnight Korea time. The 69-year-old served 4 years, 9 months behind bars following her impeachment and removal from office over a massive corruption scandal. The pardon was announced last week by the Moon administration as part of its special amnesty for the new year in consideration of Park's deteriorating health and the government's efforts to promote national unity. However, since Park is currently receiving treatment at a hospital in Seoul, she received her pardon certificate at hospital and is expected to remain there until early February. Park is eligible for government security protection, but other former presidential privileges have been nullified due to her conviction. Now, many people in South Korea celebrate the new year by travelling to the country's east coast to see the first sunrise of the year. It's rather a little bit of a national tradition, you could say, that dates back many years. However, in light of the pandemic, local authorities have imposed measures to prevent big crowds forming in close proximity to one another. Our Kim Yeon-sung with this report.
The beaches of Korea's east coast are the first parts of the mainland to see the sunrise on New Year's Day. But on January 1st this year, Gangwon-do province will close its beaches to prevent crowds of tourists from flocking to the area for the first sunrise of the year. The province has canceled its big annual sunrise event for the second year in a row. Seaside cities in Gangwon-do are also taking extra steps to prevent crowds. Sokcho City is cordoning off its beaches from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. A fence will be installed along the 1.2-kilometer coastline, and 5 public parking lots nearby will be closed. Samcheok City, sometimes called the Naples of Korea, will also close its white sandy shores to visitors from 6 to 8 on the morning of January 1st. The most popular place to visit, Gangneung City, won't be closing down all its beaches, but it will shut down the area's observatories, bridges, and its seashore landmarks. On the 16 of the beaches that will stay open, authorities will be on site to make sure that everybody is keeping a safe distance from each other and that there are no groups larger than 4. But despite these measures, train tickets from Seoul heading to the East Coast are almost sold out, and hotel rooms close to the sea are near full. For those not traveling to the East Coast for New Year's, the Korea National Park Service will air the sunrise live on YouTube. So anyone who's interested can check out the sun rising from some of the most scenic points in the country, like Daecheongbong Peak on Seoraksan Mountain or Cheonwangbon Peak on Chirisan Mountain, from the comfort of their own homes. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. A lighter note today, as it is New Year's Eve, December 31st in South Korea right now. The country and much of the world is preparing to see in 2022, either with their family or friends. However, due to the pandemic, all the related lockdowns we're seeing, restrictions, as well as the health impact of COVID-19, 2021 was much like the previous year to that in many respects. However, let's not be overly pessimistic, as for one night at least, we can hope for a brighter chapter to open up in front of us. Now, the way society mark the changing of the year is as different as a number of cultures around the world, with some preferring big, rowdy get-togethers, others more quiet reflection. In South Korea, there really is a mixture of the two. Generally, the younger people looking for a big night out. Then there's those who prefer to watch the ringing of the Boshingak bell in Seoul, or heading, as we just heard in that report there, to Korea's east coast to see the first sunrise of the year.
For more on how New Year's traditions differ around the world and how we can still enjoy the occasion despite the pandemic, we are joined by Natalie Compton, a travel reporter for The Washington Post. Good morning, Natalie. Thank you for coming on, and Happy New Year to you.
Good morning.
Now, let's start. Well, for most of us, international travel is something we cannot indulge in this New Year's because of the pandemic. But what are some of the unique ways different cultures traditionally mark the New Year's?
So a lot of the common themes that you're going to see with cultures around the world, people love to celebrate with family and loved ones or symbolism. Some of the ones that I think are really fun are in Spain and parts of Latin America. People will eat 12 grapes, one in each chime leading into the new year. If you don't eat them in time, you have bad luck. Or in Greece, you hang onions, as onions are a sign of growth, birth. So Greek people will hang onions. There's a lot of very simple things done with or without coronavirus being an issue this year.
Okay, Natalie, if you wouldn't mind just lifting the mic a little bit closer to your mouth, because you're kind of breaking up during that past answer, but we heard the vast majority of it. But considering we can't go to Spain, as you mentioned, or any place like that due to the pandemic, you wrote in an article for the Washington Post about the ways we can do it ourselves, kind of recreate something similar at home. Of the ones you wrote about in that article, which people can check out online, which are your favourites? And if someone watching is looking to switch things up, they have something planned, but they want to change it last minute, do you have any quick and simple ones that we could potentially try tonight?
Sure. By far, the most simple and easy one is going to come from Denmark. All you have to do is take your shoes off, get on top of a chair, and at midnight, jump off that chair. This is symbolizing jumping into the new year, going out with a bang. If you don't jump off that chair, that's bad luck. So make sure you get that going right on time. One of my favorites comes from Japan. People in different cultures will prepare their Japanese soba noodles in a particular way, depending on where you live. But these noodles symbolize a long and healthy new year, long and healthy relationship with your family, as well as cutting off the bad luck from the year.
Well, maybe I'll get a bowl of New Year noodles today. Well, depending on who you speak with, the New Year isn't limited to January 1st. Koreans mark two New Year holidays, January 1st and the Lunar New Year, or Seollal, which falls in February next year. Now, outside those two, what other New Year celebrations are common around the world?
You're right. People do not always celebrate on January 1st. We have in Russian culture, the Orthodox New Year falls about a week later. In Bali, actually, New Year's doesn't take place until March. And that celebration is much more somber than the ones that we've talked about. They spend the day in silence, meditating, really reflecting on the new year. So depending on where you are, it could look very serious or a little more fun and festive gathering with your family.
Right, well, I was just thinking instead I'd rather see you jump off a chair like they do in Denmark rather than eating noodles. But finally, because of COVID, a lot of people have no choice but to spend New Year at home. Perhaps they will invite some friends over. Do you have any tips on how, if we want to make our own New Year's Eve party at home, how best to do it in a fun, simple and manageable way, also safely, but all while giving that little international flair to it.
Something that brought me a lot of joy during lockdowns in the beginning of COVID was thinking about some of the travel that made me the happiest in my life, thinking back on those fond vacation memories and recreating a dish by cooking something from the culture that you loved visiting. So maybe that is getting a bottle of mezcal, cooking up a Mexican feast for yourself on New Year's Eve. That could be getting French cheeses in a baguette and a bottle of champagne. So if there's a way that I recommend channeling travel during New Year's Eve to celebrate, I would say absolutely try to cook a meal from one of your favorite travel destinations.
All right. Well, Natalie, unfortunately, we're out of time. So thank you for the tips. Happy New Year and have a great 2022.
Thanks.
South Korea's cultural industry enjoyed huge international success in 2021 thanks to the smash hit Netflix series Squid Game and, of course, the continued global fervor that surrounds BTS. South Korean classical music, ballet and musicals also garnered a lot of international attention. So 2021 was a very special year in terms of culture. Our Kim Bo-kyung gives us a rundown.
There were plenty of success stories this year. Starting with classical music, two South Korean pianists, Park Geun-hye and Kim Do-hyun, came first and second respectively at the 63rd Ferruccio Busoni International Piano Competition in September. For the final round, the winner, Park Geun-hye, played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, a 45-minute piece that requires difficult techniques, which he says he was mesmerized by right away after he listened to it when he was at elementary school. Second place, Kim Do-hyun, who chose Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 2, says he tried to show his own music. Musicals have really struggled this year, facing tough, constantly changing social distancing measures. But at the same time, South Korea has become a new destination for licensed musicals. Beetlejuice, which premiered on Broadway in 2019, was staged as a licensed musical for the very first time anywhere in the world when it came to South Korea. While Hadestown, the winner of 8 Tony Awards, including Best New Musical, also hit the stage in South Korea for the first time outside of Broadway. In ballet, Park Se-eun was named an étoile, meaning star, at the Paris Opera Ballet, becoming the first Asian ballet dancer to obtain the title in the company's 352-year history. She had worked for one of South Korea's major ballet companies, the Korea National Ballet, and moved on to Paris to become an official member of the elite dance company in 2011. Art lovers got a glimpse of some rare pieces as late Samsung Group chairman Lee Gun-hee's vast collection of more than 23,000 pieces was donated to art museums. The size and the extent of the collection was unprecedented, and the Culture Ministry has made a decision to come up with a new museum tentatively titled Lee Gun-hee Donation Hall to house Lee's collection in a vacant plot in the Songyang-dong area of Seoul. Also, the country's biggest art fair, Kiev Seoul, saw a record turnout in 2021. It announced its sales at $55 million, the highest ever, and a turnout of approximately 88,000 visitors. Given that Kiev is now going to be holding the fair, along with one of the most renowned art fairs in the world, the Frieze, the local art sector could see more growth in the coming years. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, staying with the stories that made the headlines in 2021 in terms of sports, it will go down as the year Japan, under unprecedented circumstances, invited thousands of athletes from all 4 corners of the world to Tokyo for the Summer Olympics. Our Han Sang-woo takes a look back at those games.
2021's Tokyo 2020 was an Olympic Games like no other. Its puzzling name gives away the unprecedented circumstances that were behind it. The COVID-19 pandemic, a 1-year delay, and no fans in the stands. Despite no spectators, though, athletes from around the world gave it their all, fighting through Japan's extreme summer heat to etch their names into sports history. A new Olympic champion in the 100-meter dash was born as Lamont Marcel Jacobs opened the post-Usain Bolt era. Jamaica's Elaine Thompson-Herah also wowed crowds with her own blazing sprints, while American swimmer Caleb Dressel claimed 5 gold medals to cement his place among the sport's all-time greats. Team USA gymnast Simone Biles, meanwhile, reminded the world that superstars are also human, that they can succumb to immense pressure when not in the right mental state of mind. For South Korea, though, it was in Tokyo that the national archery team, already the world's best for decades now, reached new heights. Gwangju's very own Ansan swept all 3 of her events to claim Olympic archery's first ever Triple Crown and become the first South Korean to win 3 gold medals at a single Summer Games. And right beside her in the newly introduced mixed team event was 17-year-old prodigy Kim Jae-deok, who, fueled by his signature cheer, won 2 gold medals himself.
I yelled fighting to overcome the pressure and tension to get rid of the nervousness. Before I began my first event, I asked my coach if it would be okay to shout fighting out loud, and he was fine with it, even telling me to do it with more confidence. So I think I yelled it even louder and more often at Tokyo 2020.
Fencing and gymnastics also saw the rise of new Olympic champions. But this year's Games certainly wasn't Korea's best performance on the grandest stage, shockingly failing to win a single gold in both Taekwondo and Judo, 2 sports the country has always excelled in. That didn't stop Korean athletes from displaying true sportsmanship, though.
Claiming the gold medal was all I'd ever dreamed of, so losing was tough. But Wolf's tears of joy moved me. I could tell how hard he had worked to get to that gold medal moment. Had it been me who won, I probably would have shed tears as well.
The Games presented a number of touching storylines, from women's volleyball legend Kim Yeon-kyung's last Olympic hurrah to the introduction of the country's next swimming icon in 18-year-old speedster Hwang Sun-woo, and Andre Jin Kokiard's ambitions of taking rugby mainstream in Korea by representing his newfound home.
It was a no-brainer for me. I wanted to be Korean, and now I finally saw a way through sport that I could finally become a Korean citizen.
All in all, Tokyo 2020 shined just bright enough to overcome COVID-19's shadow. Nearly half a year later, the world now awaits the Beijing Winter Olympics coming February, another platform on which world athletes will be gunning for sporting greatness. 한성우, Arirang News.
Welcome to Dialogue This Week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. Now, today is the last day of 2021 here in South Korea, and despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the emergence of the more transmissible Omicron strain, South Korea still managed to make record accomplishments in various sectors. Now, one of the things that kept us entertained and gave us something to look forward to was the release of fun and mesmerizing K-contents. To give you a short preview, our very own actress Yoon Ye-jung became the first Korean actor to win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for her performance in Minari, a film that tells the story of a Korean immigrant family that moves to rural Arkansas to start a farm in the 1980s. She reached the pinnacle of her decades-long acting career at the age of 74 and was even named one of the 100 most influential people of 2021 by the Time magazine. And also, the famous Netflix drama Squid Game remained on the world's top spot in Netflix TV show category for 46 days, creating a viral craze. Another series that followed, Hellbound, was also garnered much attention from global viewers. For more discussions on these accomplishments, we are joined by pop culture writer Annie Hariharan through the line, and our go-to film critic, Jason Begervais. He's on Skype. So good morning to you both, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Now, first, let's start with Annie. So this time a year ago, K-culture had global recognition for K-pop and K-beauty products, but 2021 has really been a year for Korean TV series and Korean language films to draw global attention. So for you personally and those around you, what drew you to Korean visual content?
Well, I think firstly is because I have no preconceived ideas of Korean movies. I watch a lot of American movies, but with Korean movies, I feel like I'm learning and discovering new things, so that's quite exciting. But I think the biggest draw card for me is that it's very stylistic. The cinematography is very beautiful, but also it's very grounded. I feel like the characters are very relatable. You know, they could be my neighbors rather than actors. Even if they are assassins or crime bosses, the way that they speak and their mannerism is very natural, very normal, and I feel like I can relate to them. So that's why I think that's a big draw card for me.
Right, right. And also, we've heard that you're a pop culture nerd. So while the underlying messages in pop culture may be universal, the way it's expressed through the visual medium differs from country to country. So from what you've experienced, how is Korean pop culture unique?
Well, for context, I watch a lot of American, British, and now Australian TV series, but not so much movies. And I think that's because English-speaking movies can be a little bit formulaic, especially the big blockbusters. I watch a lot of international movies instead because I think there is a wider range in themes. So in Korean pop culture specifically, what I really like is that it's very genre bending, meaning I don't really know how to classify the movies. It starts with a bit of family drama, and then it ends up being a thriller, and then in the middle there's a twist. So that's very interesting, very exciting, and as an outsider, I feel like there's just no set rules or formula in Korean pop culture.
Well, so now let's bring our movie expert, Jason, to the conversation. So Jason, we've been so caught up with South Korean TV shows setting Netflix records daily, but to put the spotlight on Korean films this past year, 2021 kicked off with great attention to Minari, like I've said a while ago. Then there was the sci-fi Space Sweepers and the more recent Escape from Mogadishu. How was 2021 for Korean cinema? How do you evaluate it?
Well, certainly not as many films released compared to before the pandemic, which is a great shame. Admissions were 75% down last year, and it's looking to be quite similar this year. And there's been a resurgence in popularity of Hollywood films. You know, Spider-Man's performing enormously well. That being said, though, there have been some highlights. Yoo Sung-won's Escape from Mogadishu was a technical masterpiece, and I think Korean directors are constantly raising the bar in terms of the visuals. Lee Jin-ik's Book of Fish was also very well received by the local industry. Critics very much liked the film and praising the actors as well, Seo Kyung-gu in particular. Independent Korean cinema, as always, is something to look out for. Hong Sung-eun's Aloners, that's screened at several festivals throughout the world. It went to Toronto, San Sebastian. And lots of other independent films were released this year. I mean, that's the thing, because commercial cinema has been struggling. We're seeing a lot more independent films, and there's Lee Jong-gon's Not Out, which is also a highlight for me personally. But certainly I want to see more commercial films released, and I think we'll see that, hopefully, fingers crossed, in 2022.
All right. Well, I must apologize for the construction noise, but going back to our dialogue. So, like you said, despite the limitations, it was indeed a big year. But to add to this, I'm sure, Jason, you remember that at this year's Cannes Film Festival, director Bong Joon-ho announced the opening, and actor Song Kang-ho attended as a jury member, and actor Lee Byung-hun presented the Best Actress Award at the closing ceremony. So, for the average person like myself, this seemed like a pretty big deal. So how do you see the significance of what this means in the bigger picture of what's in store for Korean cinema?
Yeah, I mean, Korean cinema is, it's just so popular at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I think there have been different stages in terms of its popularity overseas. I mean, Park Chan-wook's Old Boy won the Grand Prix in 2004, and it could have won the Palme d'Or, but didn't. That went to Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. But I think over recent years, I mean, Korean cinema's become even more popular, and certainly Bong Joon-ho's Parasite went on to win the Palme d'Or and then went on to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, which is an historic win. And it just made sense, I think, for the Cannes Film Festival to honour that and have Song Kang-ho on the jury. And obviously, Bong Joon-ho was back in Cannes, as you expect. And I see him presiding over that jury at some point in the not too distant future, and he presided over the jury in Venice, and I think we're going to see Korean cinema just continue to become increasingly popular over the next few years because the talent is here, it has the profile, and I think everyone's looking out and seeing what's on the horizon in terms of Korean cinema.
So we will have to look forward to that. Now let's turn back to Annie. Well, there may be other platforms, yes, hello, by next year. So for the year 2021, Netflix has played a big role in making South Korean video content accessible to international audiences. But, you know, some may say it was COVID-19 that created a perfect storm for so much popularity. So what is your take? Do you think Korean pop culture would have gotten the same amount of attention eventually?
Was it because of COVID? I don't know. I mean, I think it's true we're all glued to our TV and we're all searching for entertainment and commonality. And I think streaming channels, I have to say, it makes it easier to discover new content at your own pace. And that's good. But I think the success, though, I'm not sure it's COVID and lockdown related. I think to echo Jason, you know, Parasite winning at the Oscars last year was a really big moment. And it made the average viewer, including people like myself, become really curious about Korean movies and pop culture and series. Until before that, I think my idea of Korean pop culture was the series Winter Sonata, which is 20 years old, but that was my extent of knowledge of Korean pop culture. And after that, I started watching a lot more and I started discovering things that I probably would not have known about. So I think that's why it's gotten a lot of attention. That win at the Oscars, I think, was really historic, and it exposed people to a lot more content.
And Annie, I heard that you're based in Melbourne. So what is the best?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are, right? So what is the best means to access Korean TV and films there? And I also
that's two.
Yes.
One is SBS, which is a free-to-air TV channel, and they focus a lot on international content. So that's where I get all my Korean movie fix. The other one, of course, is Netflix, and that's global, and that's everywhere.
Well, I also want to ask, like, how popular is K content there in Australia?
Probably it's very niche. It's popular among the Korean expat community here, but I think over time it's transcended that, and it's just anyone who likes movies would tune into it.
All right. And also, Jason, it seems like the OTT platform is growing, and joining Netflix, we now have Apple TV and Disney Plus. And just recently, I've seen an article that hinted HBO Max could launch in the Korean market as well. So the Wall Street Journal article that I read, it said in hunt for the next Squid Game, streaming services battle for South Korean shows. How do you see this?
Well, I mean, HBO Max is owned by Warner Brothers. It's their streaming platform. And Warner Brothers Korea, they have long been, well, they've been active in Korea for a number of years, although they did make an exit because they had a number of failures, including Kim Ji-yoon's Inlang. But they actually co-distributed Take Care of My Cat in the early 2000s, which is an iconic Korean film. They also co-distributed Park Chan-wook's Paju, and then they've been financing Korean titles as well, including Kim Jong-un's The Age of Shadows that was released in 2016 and did really, really well. And I think it's just a matter of time before that they start financing more content. Yes, they kind of left the Korean film industry, but I think it was always in view of coming back in the form of a streaming platform, and that's what they're doing. And yeah, Squid Game is just so popular, and the studio heads just see that, and they want to be very much part of that success, and so they're going to finance Korean content. That seems inevitable. And the streaming wars in Korea, they're just so intense. I think the streaming wars are intense in the States as well, but I think in Korea it's almost at another level, because you've got all the American platforms. You know, you've got Netflix, you've got Apple TV, you've got Amazon Prime, but you've also got the Korean platforms. You know, you've got Coupang Play, you've got TVing, you've got KT's platform, you've got Watcher, you've got Wave. It's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves over the coming months and years. But I think HBO Max coming to Korea, that seemed inevitable.
Wow, I'm already excited to see more of these shows coming up through these platforms. But speaking of this, Annie, what are some of your personal favorite Korean films or TV shows? And how did you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles?
1-inch tall barrier of subtitles. I've always loved that quote. But look, I grew up in Malaysia, so I've been watching Chinese, Indian, Indonesian TVs with subtitles for years. And even today, I still switch on subtitles for all shows, even if it's in English. So I don't think that was really a barrier for me. But you asked me about my favorite Korean shows, and I think I have maybe 4 or 5. That's Lady Vengeance, because it reminds me of Kill Bill, Train to Busan, Burning, Parasite, of course, and maybe I'll throw in there The Handmaiden. I think those are my top 5.
And can I also ask why?
Because there's a lot of, firstly, all these movies, what they have in common is that they are unpredictable. They've got twists and turns. And I start off thinking that they are in one type of genre, but they end up being something else. It's very engrossing. And for 2 hours, I just look at the movie and I stop looking at my phone.
I can so relate to that. Well, Jason, how about you? What titles do you want to add to Annie's list?
Well, I love all those films too, of course. Well, I'm a big fan of Bong Joon-ho and Park Geun-hye, so any of their films. Burning is fantastic, as Molly mentioned. And yeah, in terms of Korean films over recent years, I think, yeah, I loved Escape from Mogadishu. That was a great film that I enjoyed this year, and I think it's currently on one of the major streaming platforms. So I highly recommend that. Hong Seung-eun's Aloners, for me, that was one of the great discoveries of 2021. So I recommend that as well. And Lee Jin-ik's The Book of Fish is terrific.
All right, I'll add that to my list as well. And before we let you go, the new year is just around the corner. So Jason, what Korean films should we be excited for the year 2022?
Well, I think the big films for next year are Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave. I think we'll see that in the Cannes Film Festival next year. So that's his new film starring Park Hae-il and Tang Wei. It's a murder mystery. I'm very intrigued. There's also Im Sin-hae's Point Men, which is set in Afghanistan, I think in 2007, starring Hwang Jong-min and Hyun Bin as well. This is a Korean film, but it's directed by a Japanese filmmaker, Hirokazu Korida's Broker, starring Bae Jun-ah and Song Kang-ho. So I'm really curious to see that, quite possibly in Cannes as well. There's Kim Tae-yong's Wonderland, a sci-fi adventure, very intrigued by that, starring Suzy. And Han Jae-in's Emergency Declaration, that screened in Cannes earlier on this year. Doesn't have great reviews, but as someone who likes aviation, I'm quite intrigued by that. And I do like the filmmaker as well. So there's plenty to look out for in 2022. And because there are so few Korean commercial releases, I think it's going to be like buses. I think it will be a while. It's been a while since we've seen a lot of commercial films in cinemas, but I think we're going to see a lot of titles come out over a short space of time.
Well, I think I'm already so much excited to look forward to those films. All right, I'm afraid we will have to wrap up at this point. Thank you so much, Annie and Jason, for your contributions to our show. I hope you have a blessed new year, and I wish you both success in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. As the world readies itself to welcome in the new year, major venues hosting New Year's Eve celebrations are preparing for the festivities. This includes the famous Times Square, where its New Year's Eve ball went up the 130-foot pole on Thursday for a test run. The ball is being illuminated by over 32,000 energy-efficient LEDs and enhanced by 2,688 crystal triangles. Visitors looking to be a part of the celebration at Times Square will be able to enter from 3 p.m. on Friday local time, but only after showing proof of full vaccination and a valid ID. They will also be required to wear masks during the celebrations. While Times Square used to host 58,000 people before the pandemic, it will only allow 15,000 this year. London's iconic Big Ben was also preparing for its New Year's Eve celebrations on Thursday, as the clock bell got ready for ringing in the new year with 12 bongs. However, with the Omicron variant wreaking havoc in Europe, London's firework display and traditional concert that usually draws in thousands of people onto the streets has been cancelled. Iran has successfully used a satellite-launched rocket to send 3 research devices into space. According to the country's defense ministry on Thursday, the Simorgh satellite carrier rockets, whose name translates to Phoenix, launched the 3 research devices to an altitude of 470 kilometers. The latest launch comes as Iran, who touts one of the biggest missile programs in the Middle East, suffered several failed satellite launches in the past few years due to technical issues. The launch also comes as the U.S. imposed sanctions on Iran's civilian space agency and 2 research organizations in 2019, accusing them of being used to advance Tehran's ballistic missile program. Iran has long denied the allegations. Tesla is recalling more than 475,000 of its cars to address rear-view camera and trunk issues that increase the risk of crashing. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the models under the recall are Model 3 and Model S cars. The U.S. road safety regulators say for Model 3 sedans, the rear-view camera cable harness may be damaged by the opening and closing of the trunk lid, preventing the rear-view camera image from displaying, while the Model S vehicle's front hood latch problems may lead to its trunk to open without warning and obstruct the driver's visibility, increasing the risk of a crash. Tesla also recalled 135,000 cars in February, and authorities opened a formal safety probe into its driver assistance system autopilot in August after a series of crashes. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning. A very cold end to 2021. Cold wave alerts have been expanded to more regions with sharp winds, and it's going to be quite cold all day long today. Snow continues in the west of Jeollado with 1 to 3 more centimeters of snow in the forecast, while Ulleungdo and Dokdo could see heavier snow through tonight. In other than Korea's most eastern islands, sunnier skies will return by the afternoon, meaning we won't have a problem seeing the last sunset of the year. Morning temperatures are 1 to 4 degrees lower than the same time yesterday. Seoul Daejeon at -8 degrees. Chuncheon far colder at -14 degrees. Daytime highs will be 3 to 5 degrees lower this afternoon, and Seoul will only get up to -4 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And if you plan on checking out the last sunset of the year or the first sunrise of the new year, be sure to cover up from head to toe. Saturday looks to be as cold as this morning. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Now that's all we have for now, but we'll be back in 2022 at 8 a.m. Korea time next Monday for our next edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Kim Mo-kyun.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Mark.
Mo-kyun. I don't know whether you'll be staying up to midnight, but I think I'll be in bed by then, unfortunately. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for joining us throughout 2021. And if we don't see you, have a wonderful New Year. Until next time, goodbye.
Everyone knows I'm passionate. Know why? Look at how passionate Koreans are. And you know I'm fast. Don't blink. Koreans move fast too. I'm creative on the pitch. People say I'm smart. Just look how smart Korea is. I aim to be